With the first pick,
Thunderstruck! Thunderstruck! Yeah, Thunderstruck!
Welcome into the Fantasy Rant podcast presented by Stadium Rant. Check out Stadium Rant on YouTube and all social media platforms for tons of great content. I am your host, Dan Baker, here with the rest of the Fantasy Rant crew. We got Evan Gooding, Mason Beck, and Lee Cook. Today, we're going to be breaking down a real Dynasty League. We did a startup, created our own league, got some great fantasy minds in this league, going to be hyper competitive. So we want to break down this draft, talk about some strategies that we have, the best values of the draft, best trades that were made. And, it's going to be a lot of fun breaking down something real rather than just a mock draft. So got a lot of time on this one. If we don't, if we finish a little early, maybe we will jump into a mock draft, do a little speed run here. But we're going to throw up the draft board on YouTube. Make sure to check out the YouTube if you're listening in. But we got the first pick in the draft. Lee Cook lucks out. He gets the first pick. And with that first pick, he takes Patrick Mahomes. Lee, was there any thought about going with a different QB?
There was, and let me just say, especially in a dynasty, I don't necessarily want to be at one. I'd rather be around the three or really three. But I did consider Josh Allen. We are playing a 6-point passing touchdown league, which to me, with that setting, I think Mahomes is the slam dunk. In a 4-point passing touchdown, I do think you seriously consider Josh Allen. But honestly, as far as long-term goes, it's tough to see him playing into his mid-30s with the style of play. And Mahomes feels like a lock to be, playing at a high level for at least the next 6 to 8 years.
Yeah. And I do think that he's probably got his deepest wide receiver core maybe in his entire time in the NFL. Because even when he had Tyreek, after Tyreek, it was pretty shallow. So now, you got Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice is going to be playing at some point this season. He's not going to get suspended the whole year, and that could even get pushed back to next season. And then obviously still got Kelsey, a couple of younger tight ends, and Noah Gray and Jared Wiley. I like the pick. I also think I would go Mahomes in a 6-point per passing touchdown league. I think personally for me, Hurts is closer to the second option there in a 6-point per passing touchdown league than Josh Allen, just because Hurts has 2 wide receivers that are both at least top 15 in the league, locked up for the next 4 years. And an incredible offensive line. So I'll take that safety there. But I do agree. I think I would have went Mahomes as well. All right, so that brings us to Mason's pick here. He was 4th on the board, and I think kind of surprised most of us. I love CJ Stroud. I don't know if I would have went CJ Stroud as the 4th quarterback in Dynasty right now, but talk us through your pick.
Pretty much I've done multiple startups this year, and I've gotten 104 actually in a good majority of them, and I've always pretty much taken Stroud here. And I've been in one where he was taken before that. Might take one more year before he really can evolve into those elite numbers that Mahomes or Allen does put up. But the organization, he had a great rookie season, first of all. There's no denying that. Showed a lot of promise, just in his first year. And then the organization itself, obviously going and trading for Diggs shows, and getting Joe Mixon shows that they are confident in him and what he can do. I think he's just a safe, long-term guy. Just off of what the organization's shown, what he's shown, I just, give it 1 or 2 years and he's going to be one of the top in the league. I mean, maybe he could end up having a career where he's in, around the 10th best quarterback every season. But if I can get that for, say, 10, 12 years, I'm happy taking that at the 104 in a super flex league.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there any consideration going with, either Lamar or one of the top wide receivers?
The only time I don't draft quarterback as my first pick in super flex leagues is if I'm getting them on, and I got to be around the 107 to 110 to kind of be in that range for me to pull the plug, just because CJ Stroud does have a higher value than him, and I'm going to take him on over Justin Jefferson. That's just me. That's not the consensus thing, but that's just how I am. Yeah, USC fan. Just I have him on more teams than any other player probably. So, I just love that dude. So I would, but yeah, I wasn't really thinking Jefferson. Definitely was going to go Stroud or Jalen Hurts, whoever fell to me at the 104.
Okay. I like it. I like it. We were kind of rapid fire after that. We all had picks in the top 7. So after Mason at 4, there was one guy in between us, and then I was at the 106, Evan at the 107. I end up steering away from my normal strategy. I also, generally speaking, it's comforting to take that top tier, young, talented quarterback in the first round and then kind of build around that afterwards. But early on, I had been mocking up a storm. So I had already seen that Kirk Cousins generally falls to like the 8th round or so. And both Kirk and Michael Penix have forced each other's ADPs down, in my opinion. So very early on, I was already ready to try to take that stack late in the draft and really shore up my quarterback position for 4 or 5 years at least. So I went with Jamar Chase in the first. I only have 4 dynasty leagues right now. Don't have a share of Jamar, and was really happy to get him here. Just neither him or Higgins have secured the bag yet, but we know that Chase is the priority there, and it seems like Higgins might be on his way out. Still hasn't even signed the franchise tag yet. So I think if Higgins leaves and it's just Jamar, why am I blanking on the rookie's name right now? Guy from Alabama. Thank you, Jermaine Burton. If it's just Jamar and Jermaine Burton for the most part, he is going to eat. He's going to be a 160, 170 targets per year kind of wide receiver. So love getting him there. Evan was right up afterwards. You take CeeDee Lamb. Was there any thought of going with another player or Lamar, Mon?
Yeah, starting this draft, I wanted to take a different approach to what my standard is and taking all young players. So I went CD because I wanted to see if I could craft up a win now team. Turns out I went back to my usual ways and started eventually drafting rookies throughout the draft, and then I had to go all in on it. So looking back now, as opposed to taking CD, I probably wish I took AR here, honestly.
Okay.
That would be somebody that I wish I took over him. But CD, he's locked in for another solid 5 years. I see as very good production. So happy with it. No complaints there at all.
Yeah, I mean, he's there's such a giant gap between him and the next best wide receiver on the team. Brandon Cooks is, he's no slouch. For years. He was slept on, always a value. However, he's not a consistent producer. He's not going to be a target hog. There's really nobody to take away those targets from CD. So I like the pick. I do also. I think I would have went Lamar or maybe Richardson over Lamb personally. To me, Jamar Chase is the wide receiver one because of the quarterback situation. Obviously, Jefferson, arguably the most talented. Not even arguably, really. He's the most talented wide receiver in the league. But with me not having any faith in Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy, I'll take Chase as my wide receiver one personally. All right. So what do you guys think was the best pick in the first round if there was a true standout pick at value? I feel like a lot of people were dogging on the AR pick and definitely the Marvin Harrison pick at 111. Just people saying don't take the rookie in the first round. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Richardson, I think, was a great pick there. Probably my favorite pick. Harrison, like you're buying him at absolute, like it could be his peak value, and that's kind of crazy. Like even if he has amazing production, he's still probably going to be drafted right around here. So that's if he has an amazing season. So I think he's somebody that could even lose some ADP next year. But I still like the pick. I still like his future. So it just depends. They were going in on a young strategy going into this one.
I feel like the same could be said for Anthony Richardson. I think you could very well be buying him at his peak. We just don't know. I mean, the small sample size. There's a lot to be revealed. I think, and this is negated a little bit because he took Jordan Love at 201, but Caleb Williams, 112. Any of those three picks scare me just because they are high variance picks, and you really with a first round pick in a dynasty startup, you want to have a rock solid foundation. And to me, those three stand out as the ones most likely to lose value in the next season. If I had to pick one that I like the most, I feel like Amon-Ra, where he's at, getting him, what's that, at 109, and really a big teardrop, or at least a decent teardrop at receiver after that. So I think Amon-Ra, and I mean, that's about his average ADP, but to me, that's probably the most value in being able to flip around with an early second round pick.
I see you. I feel like Joe Burrow dropping into the second was wild. It was absolutely crazy. And you guys, you guys wanted to talk some trades as well. I think, Lee, you had the breakdown on what that trade ended up being. You had Tyler up to the 202 to get Burrow.
To me, I mean, that was probably the best trade. And just looking at real world implications, what players it ended up being. Tyler ended up giving up A.J. Brown, Baker Mayfield, and Sam Howell, which that pick was traded by the recipient later on. He received in return Joe Burrow, Derrick Henry, and Demario Douglas. To me, that's just if you're in a non-startup and you're just making a trade, you're going to have to pay quite a bit more than that for Joe Burrow. So him making that move early and being able to pair Burrow with Lamar is a pretty scary start to the draft.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest regrets in this, is not offering just a little bit more to try and move up and get that stack between Burrow and Chase. I had my eyes set on one of the top 4 running backs in Bijan, Jameer, Brees Hall, or CMC in the second round, and I really didn't want to give up that second round pick, which was the deal breaker for me. But looking back at it, I could have grabbed some running backs still later in the draft, and getting a guy like Burrow is irreplaceable.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Burrow's gone, and I've seen him go like 106 before. His value is down so much just because of the injured season. But if Burrow plays a full season, halfway through week 8, you're going to be trading for him at the value of around CJ Stroud, maybe like Justin Jefferson type value. That's just what it's going to be. Me not realizing that Burrow had fallen into the second round, I probably should have, like Dan said, tried to at least send an offer, just because, I mean, Burrow's one of the most talented QBs in the league, and to fall into the second in a super flex is just
bonkers.
People are just way too worried about that injury. Obviously,
after AR, Caleb Williams, and Jordan Love, Burrow's proved much more than that, and it's got the stud on the team. Definitely one of my biggest regrets in this draft. But let's move on to our next picks here. Evan, you lead off the second round of us 4. You take Jahmyr Gibbs. Take Jahmyr Gibbs over Brees Hall and CMC. Interesting, but we didn't get the news of the CMC extension at the time of this pick. But do you have any regrets with that? Would you have rather gone Brees, CMC, or maybe another stud wide receiver?
Yeah, it was Gibbs or Brees for me too. That was the decision to be made. And to be honest, I think that Jahmyr Gibbs, what I've seen from him and what he could be, I value that more. And, he doesn't have the injury history that Brees has now lingering on him too. I don't love having that, fear over my shoulder. So I'm going to take this locked-in guy who I know is not going to be an absolute workhorse either. He's got David Montgomery, so he's not going to get a ton of tread on the tires. And I love the way that he's used in the game because it's very productive for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, he's a pass catcher. He is going to stay fresh. But the reason you brought up as a plus is why I view Brees Hall as the RB2 in Dynasty right now, right behind Bijan. It's neck and neck. It is going to be a 1A, 1B situation there.
It was a tough one. It was a tough one for sure.
So I'll interject just real quick because you mentioned it. And I think for really both your guys' picks, we're going to get to Brees Hall in just a second. But if I'm either one of you guys sitting there with Jamar Chase or CeeDee Lamb, I'm smashing Puka Nacua in this spot and clearing up 2 top 5 wide receivers. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I do. A little bit worried about the goal line work, but I love him long term. I love Brees Hall, but just for a startup dynasty, if I could have secured those 2 high-end wide receivers, that would have been the round album.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. I love Puka. I do think that Cooper Kupp has a bounce back year, but I was just on Twitter talking about this. I do think that both Puka and Cooper Kupp, like a spicy take of mine is that they both end up top 12 this year. Rams threw the ball to the wide receiver position on 71.7% of their pass attempts, by far the highest in the NFL, 3.5% higher than the next closest team. They love their wide receivers. Sean McVay's a genius. He can scheme anybody open, and they don't even need the extra help. But yeah, and on top of it, there's just not many other targets on the team. If Demarcus Robinson is the next scariest target on that team, you're in good shape, So I hear you there. Puka would have been a great addition. Garrett Wilson would have been a great addition. Or if you're already trying to go win now, Tyreek Hill's obviously a massive difference maker. So that brought me, we already kind of talked about it. Brees Hall was my pick after that. He is my 1B, RB2, whatever you want to call it. Very happy to get him there and was targeting him there early. Moving on to Mason, he takes Puka Nacua at the 209. First wide receiver off the board for you. Gotta imagine you're feeling pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, I like Puka. Maybe if Cooper Kupp does kind of have, breakback season, it does drop Puka's value this season a little more. But already taking Stroud, like I said, who, might take another year to kind of fall into that elite role where he's putting up those elite numbers for fantasy. I'm happy if, I'm okay if Puka takes a little bit of a step back this year and then next year after that comes in and throws up massive numbers again. The little worrying thing, their quarterback situation, obviously, as long as Stafford's there, passing volume is going to be there. But if you think about, Stafford, 1, has been known to be injured a lot. 2, he is an aging quarterback. There is some worry there that if they don't find another solution shortly after, there could be, say Stafford's off the team and he gets 2 more. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure his contract, but say Stafford gets 2 or 3 more seasons. Yeah. So he's there but 2 more guaranteed, potentially
2 more guaranteed, pretty much. Dead cap of $47 million in 2025, with a cap hit of just 50. I mean, 50 million is a ton, but when the dead cap's only $3 million off, no point in cutting him. He will be 37 by next season, so likely on the way out after that. But Stafford just creates fantasy gold in his wide receivers. So I don't blame you at all for taking him there. I did struggle going back and forth, and I really thought that the trade up right between our picks was going to end up being for Puka Nacua, but they went and Sam Laporta, and so perhaps that was the kicker for them. But Puka Nacua ends up going there. I think it's a great pick for you. After Lee, I'm going to have you talk about your 212 here, and then I'm actually going to have you talk about your 3rd, 4th, and 5th round pick, and then we'll go down the line, all doing the same thing here. So, Lee, you take Drake London at 212. Talk about it.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is where I really made a conscious decision and went a little bit against average draft position and kind of consensus rankings. consensus rankings would have had me take Malik Neighbors here if I'm going wide receiver. And to me, there's just too much variance. The lack of a true quarterback situation, even more than that. A guy who's never played down in the NFL, and while we think he's going to be great, I don't know. To me, there were too many proven wide receivers here. So it was really between three guys, Chris Olave, Drake London, and Tyreek Hill. And I kind of decided before I took one, I was going to go ahead and take two of the three. For me, Drake over Olave was the quarterback situation and the offense, with the Rams, coaching tree, the Sean McVay coaching tree coming in as the offensive coordinator, Kirk Cousins plus Michael Penix. Assuming Penix can deliver, he's going to have some time to develop on the bench. But Cousins has done really well, for his wide receiver one. There's not a ton of target competition for Olave or Drake London. But I feel like the ceiling is higher for Drake London this season. I'm definitely higher on him than consensus. So I decided to pair the young guy with the veteran. And really, this is where I molded my strategy that I was going to, once I take Tyreek Hill at 30 years old, I'm trying to win not just a championship in the first year. I'm trying to win back-to-back. I'm trying to start off the league with 2 championships. And that kind of pushed my strategy going forward. So in the 4th round, after another run of quarterbacks, I made a trade with Dak Prescott being the last of a pretty steep drop. After him in the next quarterback tier, we're looking at Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Will Levis, a lot of guys who are unproven and we really don't know. So I traded what ended up being the picks turned into Brock Bowers, Jonathan Brooks, and DeAndre Hopkins. And I picked up Dak Prescott, later drafting George Kittle and Gus Edwards to go with the other picks I got. So, at this point I have 2 what I consider top 10 wide receivers, at least top 12 for the next couple of seasons, and 2 top 15 quarterbacks. So that's kind of always how I never want to have a set strategy. You want to be water in these drafts, kind of let it come to you. That's really the only big trade up that I made, and it was especially noticing that you and Evan both didn't have quarterbacks yet. Evan had CeeDee Lamb, so that's a very attractive stack to get, if Dak falls to him. I was certain Dak wasn't coming back to 412. So we made that move. And then when it got back around to me, Devontae Smith to me was the best young wide receiver. We go ahead and get 2 young guys to pair with Tyreek Hill in a great offense. To me, of the wide receiver 2s, I like Devontae the most. Between Devontae, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, which are really those big 3, I like Devontae's connection, having played with Jalen Hurts in college. A.J. Brown is awesome, don't get me wrong. But to me, I think for the long term, Devontae Smith is going to be a guy who gives you a solid, top-end wide receiver 2 productivity in that 12 to 18 range. So that was just too attractive for me to pass up at that point.
Yeah, no, I agree with you in that Devonta Smith is the best wide receiver 2 in the NFL. I think that he is the best route runner by a long shot. Guy doesn't drop the ball. He's always open on a good offense. And, like T. Higgins, too injury prone to really throw into that mix. Jalen Waddle, I do think could end up being in the long run the best pick, I would say 2 years down the road, just because Tyreek Hill likely to be out. He said that he was going to end his career after 3 years, and we're 1 year into that. So if Jalen Waddle can take over that role, just got the bag, I do think that he has the opportunity to take over. But obviously you've got Tyreek there. Don't want too much on one team there. So I think Devonta Smith was a great pick to keep your team balanced and still in a win now mode. So we got Mason up next. Mason, talk about your picks 3 through 5, or rounds 3 through 5 for you.
Yeah, so number 3, 3rd round, I went T-Law. I was thinking of taking the homer pick and going Purdy, but I do think that T-Law could potentially be at a low right now.
They went and got him some wide receiver help. Obviously, Calvin Ridley left, but they got Gabe Davis. They drafted Brian Thomas. I think there's a lot of potential to help him there. The dude's the franchise quarterback, 100%. I mean, Purdy probably is too. But Lawrence is locked in there. I think there's just the whole entire consensus value on Lawrence is way higher. I think he's got his floor is pretty high. He doesn't have the greatest ceiling. Like, he's not going to really ever throw up, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen numbers. But I just think already, having a guy, CJ Stroud, who I think in a couple years will be throwing up those elite numbers, having a second guy who has a very consistent floor will be good to pair with that. And T-Law next year could be a second-round pick again. All it takes is one good season and his value is just skyrocketed again. But then with my fourth pick, I broke my usual strategy and went a tight end early. I drafted Kincaid in the fourth. There's just not much targets there for Josh Allen. He's one of the few people that actually does have any chemistry with Allen. And so I think this is, he already came off a productive rookie season for a tight end, which historically we don't really see. And I just think, the sky's the limit for him, really. He's put into a perfect situation. The talent is there. I just think Kincaid could really end up, at some point this season, maybe at first it's a little just because, they're still trying to figure out how to work this new entire revamped offense. But I think Kincaid at some point will be putting up probably consistently top 6 or 7 tight end numbers on a week-to-week basis. So I just wanted to go there. Already kind of going the young route with my 3 previous picks of guys that I think, have 10 years left in their career at minimum. I thought Kincaid was good to kind of go with that. And then with the 5th, I went Kenneth Walker. Not my favorite pick. Obviously, Kenneth Walker's production went down a little bit last year. Zach Charbonnet could develop a little more in this offseason and take a little bit more touches away from Walker. But I think that, Walker's he's going to have those games where he just wins for you because he gets those huge breakout runs like we've seen. And I don't know, I've been on higher on Walker, I think, than most people have since he's been brought into the league. Like, I think I forget who his competition was, but a lot of people were drafting the year he got drafted. We're drafting at like 104, and I was taking him at 102 in rookie drafts when I could. I've just fallen in love with Walker. Sadly, I hate that he's a Seahawk, but I love Walker. I mean, and if his catching skill set can improve at all, he can seriously be one of the best running backs in the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he's explosive as hell. If you were talking about like who was drafted that same year, that was a top end running back, it was Brees. And if you're talking about who he's competing with in year 1, I believe it was Rashad Penny, right?
No, because Brees Hall was the unanimous 101 that year, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and then in non-super flex leagues, I think there's a couple of receivers that year that were pretty high up there, if I'm not mistaken.
Garrett Wilson, Drake London.
Oh, that was that same year.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
No, I was higher on Walker than I was them, and I'm going to stick with my gut that I think Walker's just going to have a great, we saw his first year or 2 and just be great, and then last year it was a drop, but Seattle in general just dropped off a lot last year.
Right. And I mean, Kenneth Walker, he is by far of the running backs available at that pick, by far my highest pre-draft grading of the running backs on the board. I do think I probably would have passed on Walker there, maybe gone with another wide receiver. I'll talk about it in a second, but I was pretty upset that Tank didn't get to me. I should have known better. Louis L. Stewart there. He is a Texans fan, and I should have known that he's not going to get past Louis. Should have traded up with Mason maybe to go and grab him, just get up to 2 picks there. But unless anybody else had something to add on that, I'll jump into my 3 through 5.
So just real quick, Kincaid, I think it may have been, I mean, I love Puka falling where he is, but I think Kincaid is probably your best pick. When I'm looking there, He's going to be treated as a slot receiver. To me, he really reminds me of the Trey McBride type of opportunity. I know McBride came a little bit out of nowhere in that second half last season, but he's going to be a target monster, getting an extra half a point for receptions. I love Kincaid. Slight tease. I do think that pick makes me like one of your later picks in a couple of rounds quite a bit less, but we'll get to that shortly.
Yes, I agree. I was thinking about that as well. But yeah, so we'll get into my 3 through 5 here. In round 3, I go Jonathan Taylor over Brock Purdy. I didn't have a quarterback on the roster yet and already had Breece Hall. So I think that is going to be an unpopular pick across, the consensus, the general public. But I do think that Purdy, he had an insanely efficient year last year. I love the offense around him. I love Kyle Shanahan calling the plays and scheming these insane athletes on this team open. However, the 49ers threw the ball the least of any team in the NFL last year. Brock Purdy had 9.6 yards per passing attempt. That is the highest yards per attempt since, and this is as far back as PFF tracked, since 2006. No, he was still the highest. There's nobody that beat him. The next two closest quarterbacks since 2006, Matt Ryan in 2016 with 9.3, Aaron Rodgers with 9.2 in 2011. Those are quarterbacks that are pretty much at their peak. I don't know if this is going to be repeatable for Brock Purdy. On top of that, he had the 31 touchdowns through the air, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Pretty efficient. I do like Brock Purdy. I think he's going to be great this year and is going to be one of those guys that is a great value in redraft leagues. However, we don't know what Brandon Ayuk's future is. We don't know really how long Debo is going to be on this team. And without those guys there, I don't think you can be quite as efficient as he was last season.
Real quick, just to add to Brock Purdy, because those are some really good stats. I think one that kind of leans more towards possibly being repeatable is he was number 1 in the league in touchdowns with air yards of 20 yards or more.
There you go.
Tells you that he is accurate on some longer passes. It's not just all receivers taking short stuff and running it in. Yes, there were a lot of receivers, running open. It's a very quarterback-friendly scheme. I will say that I tried with 4. I tried with you here, and I think the next 3 or 4 people to trade up for Brock Purdy, and I was unsuccessful.
Yeah, I would also put Purdy above
Purdy. I did not expect you to say something nice about one of my boys, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I ended up going JT over him. JT just got a bag. He is just 25.4 years old right now. He's going to be on the team at least through the 2025 season. And we saw Zach Moss pop off in this offense. We saw Jonathan Taylor have a lot of success when he came back. I just think that he is one of those running backs that truly still has a chance to be maybe not RB1 because Christian McCaffrey is just going to catch so many passes. But at least RB2 to RB5 range for Jonathan Taylor if he can stay healthy. So I end up going with Jonathan Taylor, passing on Purdy, Goff, and Prescott in the 3rd. Wrap back around. It's a tight end premium league. I could have taken Kincaid. There's other tight ends I could have waited on, but I grabbed Kyle Pitts because, again, I said it at the top. I was very much in on getting Cousins and Penix later in the draft, and I really think that this offense is going to change so much from the Arthur Smith system that they had. There's not another, notable tight end on the roster. The tight end 2 is Austin Stogner or Charlie Warner. Is not good. And then even after Drake London, it's Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore. These targets got to go somewhere. So I like the stack with Pitts pairing up with Cousins later in the draft. And then I talked about it a little bit, but I really wanted Tank Dell to drop. Might not have been the best for me. I think Zay Flowers has a good chance of beating out Tank Dell this year. But every year afterwards, if they both stay healthy, I am much more confident in Tank Dell. Texans throw the ball a hell of a lot more than the Ravens do. And on top of it, Stephon Diggs is going to be gone next year. Nico Collins is a very different styled wide receiver, and I don't think are really going to eat into each other's targets. So I would have loved to get Tank Dell there. Made the same mistake with that Joe Burrow move, did not trade up and get him, and that's on me. But I do think Zay Flowers is going to be a target hog this season with, nobody really behind him outside of Devontae Walker, Rashad Bateman, and obviously Mark Andrews. But he'll be efficient. He's going to break off some big plays, use that crazy agility and acceleration to get away from some guys. So I think he's going to be a consistent contributor here. But this moves us on to, unless anybody else had something to add, this moves us on to Evan's next picks.
Just real
right
quick, I think that the Kyle Pitts thing, I definitely take Kincaid over it, but your reasoning, I love a quarterback tight end stack, kind of angling for Cousins. And you guys know, if you've listened, I do love Pitts' potential this year. So it makes me dislike that pick a lot less, with that strategy behind it.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would have taken Kincaid over Pitts. I was hoping Kincaid did fall to me just because I don't think I could necessarily handle another year of Kyle Pitts failing to meet expectations. And
I get that.
I don't want that worry in the back of my mind ever because I'm so over it.
I really do think that they are going to hyper target a top end wide receiver next year. That is also my belief that Keon Coleman is not what they drafted him to be. So they're going to try to, I know we're going to talk about that for Mason's pick later, but Keon Coleman, he's a big bodied guy. He has a ton of athletic talent, and maybe he can get coached up and, learn how to beat press coverage. But right now they drafted him to be an outside wide receiver. They got Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. Neither of those guys profile as an outside wide receiver. I think they're going to throw Keon on the outside at least 60, 70% of the snaps. And I think he's really going to struggle against top tier cornerbacks in the league. Nonetheless, the ones in his division, like he's got Sauce in the division. He's got Javon Howard in the division, Jalen Ramsey. I'm honestly blanking on the Patriots' top cornerback, but they always do a good job.
Christian Gonzalez.
Gonzalez. So, he showed out in his rookie season. The Patriots have notoriously taken away the top guy on your team year after year. Maybe that's not Keon Coleman. Maybe that's Kincaid, and Coleman can shine a little bit in those games. But I do think he's going to struggle, and I think the Bills are going to overcorrect and pay up for a wide receiver next season. So I go Kyle Pitts there. But let's move on to Evan's next picks. We got 3 through 5 here. They're highlighted on the board if you're on YouTube.
Yeah, 0. Yeah, not the biggest fan of the Pitts, but I do like the Zay Flowers. I was really hoping that Tank Dell or Zay Flowers were going to fall to me, Dan. So one of them I was hoping, but nope. And that completely shifted the route I was taking for my team the rest of the draft. That was the pivotal moment. But I ended up actually trading away my 3rd round pick, so I didn't have a 3rd. Do we talk about the trade? Should we bring it up?
Yeah. Do you like your trade there?
I do like the trade, actually, after how it played out as well. I know you guys may not, but I like the way it played out. I got Devon Achane, and then I got Ladd McConkey, Christian Watson, and then another pick that I traded on later on in the draft, the 15th. And then he got Trey McBride and Joe Mixon. So just those 2 positions alone, the tight end and the running back position. Granted, yes, I think Trey McBride has a long future, but I just don't think you guys know I'm lower than him on normal anyways. And Joe Mixon, I don't think that he has much longer in the NFL. Like, I don't think he has another 3 or 5 years in him. But I like Devon Achane. I think he's got longevity in the lead. Ladd McConkey just got into the league. Christian Watson, both wide receivers too, that I value a lot more than just positionally speaking. So I'm happy with how it panned out. But on the wraparound, ended up getting ETN as my next pick after Gibbs. So on a lot of my startups that I've been doing with these rookies, I've had one major issue, and that's been filling the running back position. So I answered that, and I answered that pretty heavy here with Etienne. I think that Etienne's got another 3 to 5 years in the NFL easy. And then my next pick was Devon Achane. So got the 3 running backs, so a nice core of 3 stable running backs that I shouldn't have to worry too much about, obviously pending injury. And then on the wrap back around, that's where I was hoping that Tank Dell or Zay Flowers would be there for me so I can start adding to my wide receiver core. But nope, they were taken. And I really don't like the young guys, like in comparison to who's still on the board. Like Drake May, he's a young guy, but he's a quarterback. So I took the shot on Drake May over a guy like JSN or George Pickens. And I didn't feel great about it. That was one of my tougher picks as well. I was not the biggest believer in Drake May, but hoping that, maybe my intuitions aren't always right here.
I do like the trade for you overall. I think Trey McBride is going to be a stud in tight end premium, especially. Last year, as of week 8, he started seeing at least a 69% snap share or above. At that time, in 10 games, he averaged 8.5 targets per game. In a tight end premium, that is going to stack up. Obviously, there's no Marvin Harrison Jr. there, so take it for what it is. Maybe he loses some of those targets to Marvin Harrison. But overall, I do think that you getting Achane, who was it? Achane, Ladd, and Christian Watson instead of Trey McBride and Joe Mixon. I'll take that trade all day.
Yeah, and a 1502 and a 15th round pick in a startup like this is not nothing.
Not nothing.
That's valuable.
So I like the trade as far as the draft capital. But honestly, to me, I feel like the Achane pick is kind of where your team went off the rails for me. It's not that I hate Achane. I think he's a very high variance player, though. Very explosive, but the build, how long is he going? How much workload is he going to be able to handle, and how long will he be able to handle it? But beyond that is picking 3 running backs with your first 4 picks when you could have went Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, Tank Dell, Zay Flowers with that Achane pick, and then you have 2 really high-end wide receivers and 2 high-end running backs. I'm always scared of starting that much, investing that much early with running backs in Dynasty.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. It is but these guys are pretty solid for me too. And Achane, I totally understand your concerns there too. And I share those exact same concerns, but I did answer those later in the draft, I believe.
Yeah, and just to touch on Achane, 103 rush attempts, 800 yards, 7.7 per carry. He ended up with 11 total touchdowns, another 27 receptions, and 197 through the air. I think he could. I mean, his yards per catch is less than his yards per carry, which is wild. Likely that the yards per carry do come down. That's an insane number to keep carrying on. But if he gets a little bit more involved in the pass game, if Mostert gets injured, this last season he played every game. He was not a shining example of health in years prior. So Achane has the same injury concern, but if he can stay on the field, he is going to be a game breaker. I do like that pick there.
I mean, the Achane one does worry me a little bit too. Like Lee was saying, if they can limit his workload, I think it will be great. Obviously, he's not going to be your goal line type of guy, which does take away his touchdowns, but he is that explosive where he will add in those long break touchdowns. I think down the line, they brought in Jalen Wright, who's also, speed, and then Mostert's there with speed. So this year, maybe, but down the line, I don't see those goal line touches really coming at all.
And
I
had a similar thought as Evan. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just saying that's just what worries me is the goal line touches, because if he doesn't get that heavy workload, which they shouldn't give him with a guy built like he is, not getting the touchdowns is a little scary to me. I know, but you know what I mean. The goal line touchdown.
Not getting the goal line touchdowns, correct. Had to. That's a big clarification, though.
Yeah. Oh no, it is. I mean, he's going to get those breakaway ones, but that does take away. When you're sitting at the 1 yard line and you got a running back on a team, you're usually like, oh yeah, this is easy. With him, it's like, oh no, he's probably not getting this.
Yeah. And I mean, this is part of Achan's game, so you can't take it away. But he did have 354 yards in 2 games between the Broncos and the Giants, and that's just on the ground, not even including through the air. So, not likely to keep on repeating. But Evan, let's open it up a little bit here. We talked about rounds 1 through 5. Let's go round 6 through 15 here. Anybody you want to talk about? You can highlight all your players. You can run through them really quick, but let's open it up a little bit. Talk about some of the values you guys saw in these later rounds here.
All right. Who we start? We start with me here again.
Yeah. Yep. We're wrapping it back around just like the draft.
All right. So next pick went Hawk. I think Hawk is a great value there. I think that people are scared of the injury. I mean, I know you were high on him last year, Mason. Has that changed?
No, I'm still high on him. I mean, redraft, no, but long term, still yes.
Yeah. And at this point, after drafting Drake May, I was committed to the future and going that route anyways too. So Hawkinson, pretty happy about that pick. Got McConkey, a part of that trade. Deshaun Watson could be a great value for a quarterback if he's even just partially what he was on Houston, but that's to be determined. I am pretty nervous about my QB situation. But then just taking a lot of shots. And this is where I wanted my wide receivers from 9 through 15. There's a lot of rookies. I believe in this rookie class a lot. And I think that there's great value. The one guy I did get sniped on, I was hoping not to have to take Christian Watson here. I was hoping to take A.D. Mitchell. I was hoping A.D. Mitchell would fall to me at the in the 10th there. So that was my biggest upset. I was trying to play the ADPs. I think Mitchell could have a better year than Leggett even, and just better career wise. But I ended up trying to play the ADPs. Leggett was higher, so I wanted both of them, and I ended up not getting the guy that I really, really wanted. So I was pissed about that. Then we're going all the way down to 15. So this is So between the 6 through 15, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rookie receivers. So I love taking shots on these rookies. We don't know what they could be. And if any of these guys hit where I drafted them, is going to be tremendous value, incredible value, if any one of them hit. And I think that, I don't think all of these are hitting, but 2, 3 of these guys, yeah, they're hitting.
I just want to say Evan's team was my least favorite of the draft because obviously there's a lot of upside of it, but say only one of these guys hit and the 5 other wide receivers are out of the league after their rookie contract, Evan's team is going to struggle for a couple of years.
Yeah,
they'll still carry trade value, though. They'll still carry trade value. It's
Ruben Johnston still carries value.
They're wide receivers. They're young, and they haven't been able to show a lot of potential too. So I could always try trading these guys. Whereas you have a guy that's older. Some of these other guys, like if I wanted to take a Diggs or something like that, like is he going to be valuable in a year or two? That's a bigger question mark for me.
Yeah, I would concur with Mason. To me, I think ultimately it comes down to a strategy. While you're not going in with a set. I'm going to draft these positions here and these positions here. I think reducing variance is the most important thing in fantasy football, whether it be redraft or dynasty. And this is such a high variance approach.
Oh, yes, I embraced the variance. I embraced it.
Some of these guys could hold value, but some of them could be out of the league in 2 or 3 years. I don't mind, sprinkling in, but just going that heavy with so many unproven guys. I feel like it is playing with fire. And I do think, I kind of joked about it in the draft. It did feel kind of like you maybe punted year one. That's not a strategy I'm ever going to embrace because who knows where we'll be a year from now.
I mean, this is my I will say that it has panned out for the other 3 drafts the other 3 startups that I've done. And I've done pretty much the same methodology. So, at the same time, taking these draft picks, you're also using what these teams are doing. Like they drafted these guys because they felt they had a need at that position that needed to be filled, and they drafted that guy to be that fill. So
I will say,
I'm trusting their decision making and that they want to be right. They're going to put these guys on the field and put them on, get them used.
yeah, I mean, I'll agree with that much. All the guys that you took in this area that we're talking about are bare minimum day 2 guys. You got McConkey, Pearsall, Leggett, Polk, Wilson. After that, it's a little bit deeper on the depth chart, but all of those guys are at least the wide receiver 2 on their team. So there's opportunity there if they do prove that they're worth the pick that they spent on them. You could see at least a couple of these guys skyrocket in value.
Well,
However,
Pearsall
like
might not
you
be
say,
the
would
one.
disagree. I would disagree that all those guys are guaranteed wide receiver too. I mean, Leggett very well
Pearsall's
be-
not.
Yeah,
Pearsall's
he's
not.
at least tier 1
behind
Pearsall.
Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, Pearsall's not, but everybody else I said I think is a wide receiver 2 at least on their team.
I mean, just a couple of them. Leggett, there's no guarantee. He's certainly not going to be in front of Deontay Johnson. Thielen's back. Jonathan Mingo, a year under his brand, he'll probably beat out Mingo. But I mean, I feel like he's competing more for wide receiver 3, at least while Thielen's still there. We saw Thielen has a little bit left in the tank. Who knows in New England? I mean, they've got the widest, probably least at the top, but the widest wide receiver room. Who's the
That
second
was my
one?
least favorite. That was my least favorite Polk there. But getting the stack with May, couldn't pass it up.
Baker's
I
going
don't
to beat him out.
I personally like the stack with May because I think that their play styles match up so well.
Yeah.
May likes to take risky shots in tight windows over the middle. Polk has just like vice grip hands. It's not leaving him. And like, even though he didn't run the majority of his routes from the slot, I do think he's going to be mixed in there. He's going to have a decent amount of those routes going over the middle where they just need to move the chains. And I think that over time, May's going to rely on the guy that doesn't drop the ball ever. So I do like the Polk stack personally. It is high, like all of these picks for the most part, high variance. But, I know you. I'm in all 4 dynasty leagues of mine. You're in with me.
Yeah.
And I've seen you do this. What happens is we all forget about your shitty picks. And then you gas up the picks that end up gaining value over the next 2 years. And, it most of the time it does end up working out for your teams because these guys aren't going to completely drop off in terms of their trade value. You mentioned that earlier. And if one of these guys doesn't work out, somebody else in the league will likely still have a sliver of hope, and you can move on from them for, a slight tier up in player.
Yeah.
So I've seen you do that. It's worked out. I do think that your team is a little bit better than maybe Lee and Mason are giving you credit for, but also Lee's shaking his head.
Let him talk. Let him chirp. It'll make the pain that much worse.
But you know what you're doing. You're going to sacrifice year 1, most likely. And then after that, most of your players are going to start to accrue value and you'll start making some moves. We'll see how it goes from there. But we got to move on here. We are jumping into my picks here. Coming up, we're talking round 6 through like 15. So I didn't make any trades in this draft. Nobody wanted to trade with me. I don't know why. But I got Xavier Worthy in the 6th. I didn't want to wait on quarterback any longer, so I grabbed Kirk Cousins in the 7th. This was my plan. I wanted to secure him. Get Will Levis in the 8th, which personally is one of my top 3 values in this draft for my own team. I'm not even a huge Will Levis believer, but for fantasy purposes, his style works for this. He's got a ton of veteran wide receivers on the team. Should make for a little bit quicker of, like a transition for Will Levis. He's got a cannon arm. He takes shots downfield, and he's got wide receivers that can win downfield, at least in Hopkins and in Ridley. Boyd will take some of that underneath work. Okonkwo is a talented, young, athletic tight end. And then both of his running backs in Pollard and Spears are pass catching running backs that can tack on another 300-400 yards for him by the end of the year. Nobody else really worthwhile on that roster. Mason Rudolph is backing him up. He went undrafted. I knew that after I took Cousins, most likely nobody is going to want to take Penix and just wait out that 2 to 3 years of him on the bench. So I take Ridley in the 9th. Penix does drop to me like I planned in the 10th. These were my other two favorite values, Zamir White in the 11th and Jerome Ford in the 13th. I really love those running backs opportunity. Nick Chubb on the last year of his deal, coming off of an injury, not likely to be extended at his age. Zamir White only has Alexander Madison to beat out. Dylan Lobb is, fine. He's a pass catching guy. I know Tyler, if he's listening to this, is huge on Dylan Lobb, but I don't think he's worthwhile. Alexander Madison showed he's not worth making the primary running back. Zamir White showed out more so than Josh Jacobs did in that time. And then I take Derek Carr in between them in the 12th, stack that with Rashid Shaheed in the 14th. Wide receiver 2 on that team. Really not a ton, not a ton of other options there. After you pass Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, you got A.T. Perry, Jawan Johnson, basically it. There's not a lot of talent there. Obviously, Alvin Kamara is going to catch a ton of passes, but Rashid Shaheed showed much more of a deep connection than Chris Olave did. Don't understand why. That's a Derek Carr problem. But if it's there, it's there. Rashid Shaheed had one of the highest completion percentages of 20-plus yards and the most yards in the NFL last year of 20-plus yards. So I really like the Shaheed pick. I get Braylon Allen to, put behind Breece Hall. Already talks of him being like the true RB2 on his squad. So I really like my picks in this range. I got my QBs. I got, Cousins and Penix for the next 4 or 5 years. Will Levis, he's got to prove himself. If he doesn't, I could be screwed at the QB2 position because Derek Carr is also a 1-year kind of guy. Maybe 2 years based on the contract. There's really not an out until 2026. But Derek Carr could play poorly enough to the point where he gets booted if he's not getting them to the playoffs in a very weak AFC South division. So I like my picks here. Boys, go ahead and trash all of what I said.
No, I like how you recovered from not taking the quarterbacks early. I feel like we had a little discussion in our group chat. Evan should have took Michael Penix.
I wish I did.
You
I
should have
wish.
I
taken
wanted
Michael
him to
Penix
so
early.
bad just to screw over Dan.
Just
I
to
called
have
you on your shit. I called you on your shit. I knew you wouldn't take them.
I mean, I wasn't expecting Leggett to be there and or Mitchell. So if since both of those guys were there, there's no shot I was taking them. But if they were taken before, Penix was my guy.
But I like Ford as well. I know you mentioned Ford and White. Looking back, I maybe wish I had taken him over Dobbs. I know I wish I had taken Marshawn Lloyd because I probably would have been able to choose between Ford and Dobbs a few picks later. But Nick Chubb, I mean, you're a Browns fan. It's very unlikely he recovers from that injury. So that's a guy that he should provide solid value for the next season or two.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I mean, Carr is one of those guys who I think could, his longevity is not there. I love Carr. He's from my hometown. Him and Jordan Love are my boys, both coming from my hometown. But, where you draft him at, if he has a recovery season, he was injured a lot last year. If he does produce a lot and, say your team's struggling a lot this season, you could definitely trade him up for more value than where you drafted him at. I think it's not a terrible pick by any means. Zamir White as well. I like that. I mean, the upside's there. He could emerge as, a workhorse. There's not really a ton behind him. I mean, Madison and Luabe. I don't know if I said that. Is it Luabe? Is that how you say it?
Hold on, just really quick, and then we'll jump right back into your point, Mason. Thank you, everybody in Atlanta, for listening to the podcast. We appreciate you guys. If you want some more, come on in, talk some football with us on YouTube. We got a lot more to discuss in this draft. Appreciate you guys.
Go
Tune into the
Dogs.
Stadium at YouTube. All right, Mason. Didn't mean to cut you off, brother. What's up?
No,
You're
yeah, but
saying
like I said, it's Loabe. That's how you say it, right?
who?
The running back that the Raiders drafted, Dylan.
I say Lob. You might be right.
I don't know how to say it. I just say Loabe. I could be wrong completely, but that's what I get.
This sounds wrong. It does sound wrong, to be
It does
honest.
sound wrong off how it's spelled. Yeah, it does sound wrong, but like Loabe.
Lob. It's Lob. Dylan Lob.
You could be completely right about that, but Zamir White could really emerge as a workhorse there because Madison last year showed that he cannot take that role.
Right.
I mean, there's no scenario where I see Madison being a workhorse and really, like maybe Madison does take a little more the target or of the snap percentage, but Zamir White's going to be in there at minimum 35 to 40%, I believe, and it's going to get him enough. I mean, the passing game's not there. They got AOC and Gardner Minshew, which that offense is just going to have to put something together, and I think through the running game might be their kind of fade out option of what they're going to rely on. Hope that some of these younger backs can kind of carry them.
Yeah. I think Lob can take some away in the passing game. He's definitely a fluid pass catcher, much more so than Zamir White is. But it just seems like this offense is going to be so based on the run game that I'm comfortable taking Zamir White in a likely at least 200 plus carries on the ground.
And with your two first running backs being Breece Hall and Jonathan Taylor, it's an upside pick,
Right.
Maybe you just flex wide receivers. Having him as your third guy, if he does get just a good amount of snap percentage, it could be a very solid pick.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I try to go mostly youth and upside after my core was filled. Don't want it after you got the guys that I'm never going to start, Jaleel McLaughlin over Zamir, Jonathan Taylor, or Breece Hall, unless Javonte goes down or he just ends up being a stud. So got the youth. Maybe they pan out in the future. Let's move on. Lee, I know you have a hard out, right?
Yeah, I'm good for about 17 minutes.
Let's just reverse the order here. Mason, you'll cap off the episode here, talking about 6 through 15. I'm gonna let Lee take it off just in case he gets he has to leave a little bit earlier. So round 6 through 15. Walk us through your picks here.
Switch that highlight over for me.
Yep.
So the big one, to kind of start off this, and this is especially if you're at one of these turns in the draft. I probably could have went one pick back in that trade where I traded up for a Dak, and I would have been picking in front of Louis, and it ended up that I was picking behind him. He took Jonathan Brooks. I very likely would have taken Jonathan Brooks at 7-1 or 6-12 in this spot. However, with the way my strategy is playing out and trying to win a championship now or in the first 2 years, I don't know that, especially this season, it's pretty hard to think Jonathan Brooks is going to have a better year than Josh Jacobs. Coming off the injury, Brooks definitely has more long-term value, but Josh Jacobs playing in the best offense he ever has. He's got Lloyd there who could take away a little bit. I don't think A.J. Dillon is. So I don't mind, especially now that I've decided at this point I'm going win now to take Josh Jacobs. And then, next round, it gets back to me. I need a running back too. Jacobs was my first running back. Want to mix in some youth. So Tajay Spears, the guy, pretty high on. And Tony Pollard is a guy also that I don't hate, but I still see Spears as the 1A in this offense. They drafted offensive linemen in the first round in back-to-back seasons. We've got the son of an offensive line coach coming in to run the offense. So I expect it to be we've got Will Levis, a young quarterback. I know they've added a lot of pass catching options, but I still expect this to be a run first offense. And Tajay Spears is a guy who could really sneak up and be a top end RB2 and maybe even sneaking into the back end of RB1 if things go right and he really takes the lion's share. The next pick there, Amari Cooper. Again, at this point, I've committed. I'm going to win now. He's a guy who the only pass catcher in the Cleveland offense that has chemistry with Deshaun Watson. I realize that things could change, next season and beyond, but still think he has some juice. And even if he doesn't end up in Cleveland, maybe he goes to a better quarterback. Again, kind of same principle, but Deontay Johnson is probably one of my biggest buy lows on the season, redraft and dynasty. I just feel like we saw what Bryce Young did with elderly Adam Thielen. You have to think that the Panthers offense is going to be better with Dave Canales. He's resurrected Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, for God's sakes. Don't tell me that he can't do something with the number one pick, a guy who really showed a great accuracy and anticipation at Alabama. And I know Bryce Young didn't look great last year, but you have to believe that offense is going to take a step forward. And Adam Thielen dominated last season. So I see Deontay Johnson really stepping into that role and being a guy who resurrects his career. He's gotten – I believe he got an extension when he came to Carolina. I may be wrong on that. I feel like he got a decent amount. No?
I don't believe so. I do think this is going to be his last year, but I still love the Deontay pick. I think he is so slept on. No one really understands what he's doing as a route runner. Am I frozen?
No, you're
good.
Oh, everybody else is frozen for me. So I was like, oh God. Yeah, no, I just looked up the contract in the meantime. Deontay is on the last year of his deal. Got $10 million cap hit right now. $10 million cap hit, $3 million dead cap. Obviously they just traded for him. They're not moving on from him, but he's going to turn 28 years old in about 6 days. So 16 days. But yeah, so he's going to be in a big year for him. If he does not produce the way me and Lee thinks he will, he's likely going to get moved on from. But I so support what you said with Bryce Young. He was such an anticipatory thrower in college, and that was one of the reasons why I thought that he would work despite his size. And it didn't look like him at all. There is no version of that college quarterback in the NFL. But maybe it's the scheme. Maybe he's trying to learn something he's not used to. He's on one of the most consistently dominant collegiate teams in the history of the game. And going from that type of dominance to, the Carolina Panthers is quite a switch up. So maybe with a little bit of help now, he actually get somebody the ball, make those anticipatory throws. I feel like maybe he would want to make those throws, but was rushed so quickly because of that offensive line that, there's not time to even wait to lob the ball in a direction. You just think it's going to get picked. I wouldn't want to play quarterback for the Panthers.
It was a historically bad offense. And I know we have a certain opinion in the Stadium Rant group that coaching doesn't matter. I think that's more for basketball, but we know it matters in the NFL. And again, if you can make Geno Smith and a Pro Bowler, if you can turn around Baker Mayfield's career, you got to believe Canales is going to be dialing up or really playing into Bryce Young's strengths. So that offense cannot be as bad as it was last year. And again, Adam Thielen had a really good year, especially those first 10 weeks of the season. I went Brian Robinson with the next pick, a little bit of a homer pick, but I don't think Eckler's going to take away a ton. He's a third down back at this point in his career. I see Brian Robinson getting a ton of the goal or all of the goal line work. And at 25 years old, last year was his first year coming off of his rookie season when he was shot in the preseason. I think Brian Robinson's one of the more underrated backs in the league, honestly. And I could really see him, breaking out this year. Went with a 3-pack of receivers after that. Romeo Dobbs, he blew up in the playoffs. We don't know who's going to be the number one target for Jordan Love, but I feel like he has just as good a chance as Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. And I feel like Wicks is going to be kind of the distant fourth. But honestly, I could see any of those three guys emerging as the number one target. Josh Palmer, again, is one of my sleepers of the season. He's a guy in very limited time when Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were out. He averaged 10.5, 10.6 fantasy points a game during that span. Still a very young receiver. I think it's his third year in the league. The only receiver that has proven chemistry with Justin Herbert. And who knows? But I could, at that price, I could see him being the wide receiver one for a very good quarterback. And then Curtis Samuel, again, he's a guy who's been injured much of his career, reunited with Joe Brady, who had the best season of his career was when Joe Brady was the offensive play caller in Carolina. We don't know who's going to be the number one target for the Bills. So you're really just taking some shots at some veterans there and some guys who could surprise and be the wide receiver one for their team. And then I did mix in Gus Edwards as well. He's 29. It's not supposed to work, but we know Jim Harbaugh likes to run the ball. We know Greg Roman is a run the ball type of offensive coordinator. This is going to be a run first team that's invested in their O-line. To me, he's definitely in the pole position to be the starting running back and get that goal line work for the Chargers. So really committed to my win now strategy at this point. And that group of guys I just mentioned, I've got a couple of interchangeable pieces as far as injuries and bye weeks. And I feel like it's going to be tough to get me under that top 6 scoring for one win a week for median scoring.
Yeah, I just want to comment on Deontay. You got him as your wide receiver 5. And I think Deontay, he's not that guy who's going to throw up those elite numbers, but he's got a great floor just off of his route running and his skill set. And having him as your wide receiver 5, a guy who you're happy to just plug into your lineup, I think that's great. I mean, Panthers can't get any worse than they were last year. They improved the O-line. They brought in some weapons for Bryce. The running back game, Jonathan Brooks, once he's back and, finally release some pressure because, Chuba only did as good as he did in fantasy because how much velocity he got or how much snap percentage he got, but they brought someone else to help him out. But yeah, I mean, I like your picks. Curtis Samuel's got a lot of upside. Palmer's got a lot of upside. I think Palmer might be that guy that's good for 3 or 4 weeks, but once Ladmore evolves into it, maybe QJ kind of evolves more into it. Brendan Rice even has some opportunity there, just because there's no established receiver. Maybe he forms a connection with Herbert, but you got a lot of upside in those bottom 3 receivers between Dobbs, Palmer, and Samuel. For your first 5 receivers were, very good floor guys. And I do like your draft a lot to win within the next couple years. Long term, if you make the right trade, it could work out for you. But, you're definitely playing for if that meteor hits there.
Might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me, Nathan.
I'm gonna send you a mean text after that. I gotta counter it.
Just real quick, I forgot George Kittle. I did get him, right there after Tajay, and that was the second player, in my opinion, that was the last of a pretty big tier break. Dak being that quarterback, I feel like Kittle was the last of the big tier break at tight end. I know he's a bit boom or bust, but I was happy to get Kittle. I think in the 8th round, a couple of rounds behind guys like Hawkinson, like Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson, guys who I like Kittle just as much, if not more.
No, I mean,
yeah.
Being an Irish fan, he's either going to win you some weeks or, Monday Night Football, you're down by 3 or 4 points and you're like, oh, that's easy. Kittle's got this, and he's going to get 1 catch for 2 yards. I mean, that's George Kittle. That's Kyle Shanahan. That's
the thing, though, but because he went so win now, like you have the roster to make up for those down weeks in George Kittle. And then when George Kittle blows up, he really is going to put your team over the top because you have such a strong baseline. I think this is a great win now roster. Like you said, after you went Tyreek Hill, it kind of decided your game plan. And I think a lot of things dynasty managers struggle with is doing too much of a balancing act. It's great to have a balanced team, and you do have some younger players in the mix here, but a lot of them just have the win now. Curtis Samuel is the best route runner on his team by far. He just has to stay healthy. Joshua Palmer, I was really wanting to wrap around to me at the 14 or the 1506. I would have taken him above Braylon Allen, even though I love Braylon Allen, and it's a great insurance policy for my Brees Hall pick here. But Joshua Palmer, I think arguably he could have easily 120 targets. Like you said, he's the only guy that has a proven rapport with Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert is a top 8 real life, easy top 8 real life NFL quarterback. He's going to make the throws. Josh Palmer is going to be downfield. And to compare it to an immediate personnel that they have right now, McConkey's going to play the Keenan Allen role. Josh Palmer's going to play the Mike Williams role. He's going to be downfield. There's going to be some plays to be made, and especially with the threat of the run game now that it's a hardball system where they're going to be run heavy. Those play actions where he's just downfield and you're like, who was covering him? There's going to be at least three or four of those, I would say, over the course of the year. And then on top of it, like last year, they had Gerald Everett at tight end, who is older but athletic. He can make plays downfield. The tight ends that they have right now are Hayden Hurst and Will Disley. Those are not athletic tight ends. Who else is making the downfield plays? Who else is receiving those insane throws we've seen from Herbert time after time? Palmer is also one of my biggest sleepers. So we're going to have to fight for a my guy when the season comes up here. But we'll have to figure something out for that. We still got to figure out some punishments for these bets too, guys.
We do have to figure that out.
Throw some shit out there, get fucking weird with it.
Man,
let's see what sticks.
I think I have to shave my beard, or Evan has to shave his head. I can't remember what that bet was about.
You keep wanting me to shave this head. It's not happening. It's not happening. But, dude, so I can't believe you said you wanted to take Jonathan Brooks. If he was there, you would have taken. If you took Jonathan Brooks there as a win now team, you have Jonathan Brooks, Tajay Spears, Brian Robinson going in as your backs. I don't like that. I think that
what's wrong with Jonathan Brooks for win now?
What?
What's wrong with Jonathan Brooks for win? I know he got injured, but they're saying he's going to be able to start the season.
It's just you were talking about like rookies and not having trying to avoid the unknowns and the variables, and you don't have a really solid running back core here. I mean, with Jacobs you do, but with Brooks, unproven. Tajay Spears, he's got no we talked about his injury concerns with what he's capable of doing with his knee. Like his longevity is not guaranteed, and we've only seen really a little bit of him 1 year. And then Brian Robinson too, who just got huge competition added. So I would have been very nervous without like a solid shoe in running back one here, which you got.
Throw in Gus though. So Gus is gonna, in my opinion, Gus Edwards is gonna get easily 170 to 200 carries. That's like 10, 11 a game.
That's probably that's not. It's I mean that's
who else
sure
is
it's
competing?
A fair assessment, and I guess so. Like it's not. Saying that confidently, I don't know.
I hear you there, Evan. And in that scenario, if I had ended up with Brooks over Jacobs, where I went wide receiver 4 and 5, Cooper and Deontay Johnson, I would have had to go with one running back there. Probably not Javonte because I'm pretty down on him, but maybe a Ramondre Stevenson. There were a few other guys. David Montgomery was in my sights. If I went Brooks that early, I would have went with a more.
I like that. But yeah, man, and I'm nervous about this team for the long term. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson. I've never been high on Deontay Johnson. Dan knows this. We've argued about him for plenty of years in the past, and never been high on him.
Right, every year.
yes. But maybe you're right. Maybe this is the year he's a reliable floor guy or a good floor. But if this is your floor in 2 years, your floor is going to be whipped out from right underneath you, and pretty nervous about your longevity going in. to the future for sure.
We may all be dead in 2 years.
He was on saying that meteor might hit.
I mean, meteor
Well,
might hit. This election could turn south. Who knows what's going to happen?
Whoever takes over this team is going to have some problems.
Yeah, I've never left the team. And the other thing is I did add a lot of my youth later, but I'm pretty confident in my rookie draft ability and also the ability to, if things do go south, to flip to a contender. But I don't see that. I think I'm a strong top 4 team for 2 years, and then we'll see what happens. But I'm confident in my ability to rebuild through the rookie draft.
The wide receivers are undeniable. The 2 top quarterbacks in a 6-point per passing touchdown league are going to carry you some weeks. Kittle can carry you some weeks, and you have the talent to cover. The running backs, like Evan was saying, a little bit weaker in comparison. You got its opportunity cost. You got to give it up somewhere. And in Dynasty, running back's probably the place to do it. But I think for the guys that you drafted later in the league or later in the rounds, that's pretty solid. Tajay Spears outsnapped Derrick Henry. How is he not going to outsnap Tony Pollard? I don't know if he's going to be the guy that gets more touches. I think Pollard will probably still end up being the best fantasy producer on their team, but Tajay will be more efficient and continue to progress into his role. Josh Jacobs just got signed to a long deal. They're going to feed him, even though it is a 2 running back system. Brian Robinson showed great efficiency last year in the passing game, like 36 receptions for 368 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. So puts him over 1,000 total yards. I think that Eckler, even though he was hampered by the injury last year, he's older. He's going to continue to get older. I think they continue to look towards their future and let Brian Robinson take that goal line work and get a little in the passing game. And then Gus Edwards, he's just going to run in 10 touchdowns in this Harbaugh system, get between 170 to 220 touches entirely on the ground, probably catch nothing. But he's your 4th running back on the roster. So with you going wide receiver heavy, I really like your team. I'm getting to the end point here in that if we were to pick our favorite teams, I would take Lee's team as my favorite team. That is not my team.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah. No, it's
out of just the 4 of us or out of the entire league?
No, out of the whole league.
I already said something nice about Lee. I can't say anything else.
Yeah, it's against your contract. You'd be off the podcast. You can't agree with him twice. I can't agree with Evan twice in a podcast. So we all have our hang-ups. Evan, do you have a team that you would, Evan or Mason, anybody else, do you have a team that you would pick as your favorite in the league other than yours?
Honestly, I really like Louis.
The other rookie-heavy team, so I'm shocked.
Other than his QB situation, really not great.
I think his QB situation is fine. Jared Goff, great base. He's going to be a back-end QB1, top-end QB2 more likely. Jaden Daniels, that rushing upside and decent wide receiver or receiving options around him. And then we just talked about Bryce Young. He can only go up from here. But if he doesn't, he can only go up in this one season.
I hope so.
Nobody behind him. If he doesn't prove it this year, though, they could move on.
Yeah, I'm nervous. I'm nervous about it. I really am.
Yeah, no, I'm breaking the contract. My favorite team to win now is Lee. I do like winning.
Oh my God, Mason! I'm sorry, you're fired from the show. Goodbye.
I gotta say it, Lee. I hate and love you I hate and love you so much, and I know you feel the same way. But besides that, I gotta say I like Tyler's team a lot to win this year. Long term, maybe not. But I believe I do like. I haven't fully looked through every roster, but just kind of bracing over it, I do like his team. He does have Derrick Henry, Cooper Kupp. If they can kind of produce from what we've seen, those guys yet alone can win. Having Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson is just insane. Those 2 guys alone can carry you. With looking at the upside of Henry, did he draft Ramondre?
He
Yeah,
got
he did.
Ramondre, and I was surprised to see that
He
they're
has
close
some
to an
upside. He has a
extension.
lot of upside.
Yeah, I like Ramondre. I've always liked Ramondre. It's been an unfortunate landing spot. The Patriots have never been reliable at the running back position.
But Bill
Just
is
giving-
gone.
But if they give him an extension, there's not a lot else on the team right now. So Antonio Gibson, I do like, but he fumbles so much. And the Patriots, if any team benches their running back for fumbling the ball, the Patriots. I know Belichick's gone, but I feel like that it's just embedded in that franchise.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, not gonna lie, like Zeke doesn't have the long-term value, but it's pretty much just him and Rico Dowdle. There's a lot of upside for this year from Zeke, Singletary as well. But have another pretty solid production year. Doing that, I just think there's a lot of upside on that team. His team could honestly totally flop out if some of these vets don't produce the numbers that we've used to, but I think that they will kind of at least have enough rebound of a year where his team will be pretty solid.
Yeah. Personally, I do think that this is one of those teams, like, if it doesn't win now, then it will start to crumble. I do trust in Tyler that he'll go and get some values throughout, or we've seen the trade requests so far. If anyone
somebody, is that what you're saying? He'll hoodwink somebody into a bad trade.
If anyone accepts one of his first trade requests, we know Tyler just made out like a bandit. That's all I'll say. So
I've got
gonna happen.
I've accepted one of Tyler's trades in all the league. I think I'm in 3 or 4 with him now, maybe 5, honestly. And one trade where I accepted immediately without really thinking it over. After a year of progression, I looked at it and said, "Wow, I should not have accepted that."
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna, not to move on from Tyler, but if you got something to say on Tyler's team, go ahead. I wanted to comment on a couple of things.
Oh no, I'm pretty much kept up there. What were you gonna say?
So not just in the spirit of reciprocity, I may have said that right. I may not have. I felt pretty good with it. I do like Mason's team. Highlight him for just a second, though.
Oh, yep.
So the one thing that stood out to me that I feel like was a missed opportunity was the Keon Coleman pick for a couple of reasons. And I was pretty high on Coleman, probably the most of anybody on the show pre-draft when we did our breakdown.
Yeah, I think you were.
I like him a lot. However,
really quick, I'm sorry to interrupt your thing, but like, breaking news, you got it exactly right. I was like, what is reciprocity? Well, I've never heard of this ever. And you said it not confidently at all. So I was very ready to make fun of you, but you nailed it, Lee. Great job. Back to Mason's compliment.
Breaking stereotypes every day. Fantasy Rant is what we're here for.
Southern logic. What is this?
Southern logic.
So, and not that I don't like Coleman, but there are a couple of reasons why I don't like the pick. He had already taken Kincaid. So you're stacking a tight end with a wide receiver. That's not a death sentence, but I don't necessarily love it. I don't like having 2 wide receivers on the same team if I can help it, and I feel like that's very close to that. But the main reason was Brian Thomas Jr. was right there. He already had Trevor Lawrence. The value of being able to get that stack, and there was, Jaden Reed was out there, Christian Kirk, if you don't believe in Brian Thomas, there's another stack option. But to me, Brian Thomas in the place of Coleman, he does have better draft capital.
Yeah.
But just being able to stack him with Lawrence would have been.
Or even Christian Kirk.
Yes.
Kirk.
No, Brian Thomas was the pick there. Brian Thomas.
Evan's not in on Christian Kirk. We all know this.
Brian Thomas
but
was the
a
pick
full
there.
PPR league. I would be willing to bet Christian Kirk outscores Brian Thomas for the next 2 years on this team.
Well, I never talked about my later picks, so I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah, I was going to
say. Obviously, getting him and Kincaid is a little bit of a risk, because one of them could be the big dog, the other could kind of fall back. But I've grown to love Keon Coleman a lot more. I'm trying to get him in most of my dynasty leagues. I really hope that doesn't fall through, or that will hurt me a lot. Just I think he's the rookie I have the most out of any rookie this year. If I believe so. I
mean,
think
he's great value, kind of a great value. His value skyrocketed. So
it's because he's Josh Allen. He could potentially be Josh Allen's number one wide receiver. Potentially. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but there is that opportunity there, and that's just and I
Not even saying anything.
I might be a media sucker because I have loved Keon Coleman's interviews, and
The interviews are great.
They are great.
I want him to succeed so bad. I just
top end draft pick as far as interview fantasy team goes for sure.
Yeah, but continue the rest of my picks. I went Bo Nix. Oh, I got Jordan Addison as well in the 6th round, I believe.
Bo Nix, great pick there. I love Bo Nix there, man. Yeah. I was going to try to get him on the way back.
Yeah. And getting Bo Nix in the 8th, I already got Lawrence and Stroud, who are my 2, guaranteed starters. I'm high up on Bo Nix. Having him sit, behind those guys, maybe it takes a year of development. I do think he will be a solid NFL guy. And my whole kind of strategy was to later on draft Zach Wilson, which I did just so I have the guaranteed Denver starter. Gives me a good QB3 with a lot of upside of their starter. And then after that, I believe I went Diggs as my next pick. Before that, I kind of went, long term, but Diggs, just me having Stroud, I kind of wanted that stack just in case it does blow up. Then I went Jaylen Warren, who, them not extending Najee kind of gives me a lot of faith that the Steelers front office, Tomlin has a lot of faith in Warren. Going to have some boomer bust weeks, but that's fine. I went Chase Brown, who I think is going to be amazing this year. I'm so high on Chase Brown. He's probably my 2nd most owned player throughout all of my dynasty leagues. Through my 20 dynasty leagues I have, Chase Brown's probably my 2nd most owned player. Really high up on him. I don't think Zach Moss is going to feed into him too much, maybe early on the first couple weeks, but I think by week 5, 6, Chase Brown's going to start exploding. And I went Jacoby Myers because I have to. I am a Jacoby Myers enthusiast. I love that man. And I just felt how much I've talked about him in the league that we're doing for this channel. I had to draft him to, prove my point that he's going to win a championship one year so I can rub it in everybody's face. And then with my next pick in the 13th round, I went Marshawn Lloyd because.
Why, Mason? Why did you do it? Why did you do it?
Marshawn Lloyd here
because Dan has been talking him up so much. And I said, Dan drafts in 2 picks. So, what?
If I wasn't so QB stressed on my team, I would have 100% taken him in the 12th.
Yeah.
And he wasn't making it to 2 picks in Dan.
I solely took Marshawn
Lloyd for
the fact of saying, hey, screw you, Dan. I know
And you got Lee's backup now when Jacobs goes down. Yeah.
Lee's been asking for Lloyd, and I've just been telling him, hey, if you want to get me, that's okay, we'll do it.
He wants Patrick Mahomes for Lloyd.
Yeah. It's hey, dude. I don't want people to think we're cheating. I don't want them to think that I'm robbing you that much.
Collusion.
And then I went Javon Baker just because the upside of potentially being the wide receiver 1 or 2 in New England. I mean, that could be a total bust pick. And then in the 16th, I kind of, I was through a trade. I drafted Sam Howell just because Sam Howell could be out of the league in a couple years, but I think he will start at some point in this season. I don't think Gino's that guy. I mean, we wrote him off once, and he wrote back, but I don't think he'll write back again. And just Sam Howell could be at an all-time low value compared to the value that he was at halfway through last season. I just think right there it's a good pick. When I'm already pretty QB deep, I got 3 guaranteed starters between Stroud, Lawrence, and a combination between Bone and Zach Wilson. I think taking a 4th QB in the 16th round for the point of if he does become that guy and I'm able to trade him off next season and get a lot more value, I think it's a great pick there.
Yeah. still on the rookie deal. We talked about it last year. He distributed the ball everywhere, which, maybe for that Washington offense didn't work quite as well. He did take a lot of sacks as well, which hurt. But he added 52 points 56 points on the ground alone. So that is amazing to just get that little bit of a baseline over the course of the season on top of the decent passing numbers outside of the interceptions. But in this offense with these wide receivers, I think he could thrive. I like Sam Howell as your highest, most upside pick latest in the draft. I don't want to call it a value because there is a world where it just completely falls apart. But I do like that pick a lot. Javon Baker, ton of upside. Obviously, we talked about Marshawn Lloyd. One thing I want to talk about here, where does everyone stand on Chase Brown versus Zach Moss?
I mean,
Zach
I
Moss.
said it. Chase Brown.
Yeah, Jason, you said it. Lee and Evan, whoever's got the take, go for it.
I like Chase Brown. I do, but it's
Over Zach Moss?
I don't know. I think it's going to be like kind of like a Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears situation.
You said it earlier in regards to your draft picks. You're showing, these teams showing us what they want to do. The Bengals signed Zach Moss very early in free agency. Chase Brown had an opportunity to really get some work last year, and he didn't. There were a lot of times where he wasn't even on the field for third downs. Travion, I'm blanking on the last name. Travion Williams was the third down back in a lot of situations because they didn't trust Chase Brown's pass blocking. I just don't think they would have went out and got Zach Moss if they trusted Chase Brown to be that guy. I think he's a change of pace for Moss, but Moss is not even 1A. I think he's firmly going to be the lead back, and Chase Brown's going to be the backup and the spellback.
Yeah. Just to back that up, we were talking about it during the draft. I think there was this big argument in the chat. Everyone's taking their sides, and not to say anything about Mason Spick or anything. He has so much athletic upside. I am on the Zach Moss side for sure, though. Really quick, if we just take a look here, if you guys are on the YouTube with us, you'll see he had 179 rushing yards. You can see his breakaway runs. His breakaway runs, which it classifies as 15 plus or more. He had 4 of them, and it was for 89 yards. That's almost exactly half of his yards came off of 4 attempts. The rest of the 40 attempts made up his other half of his yards. That shows the inefficiency compared to like the upside and the athleticism. I don't think that he's the guy. I think that Zach Moss, I looked this up as well. They took exactly the same amount of negative yards on rushing attempts, where Zach Moss had about 6 times more rushing attempts that created those negative yards. So Chase Brown takes larger negative chunk plays, which really hurts the offense. On top of it, Lee, you just mentioned this. He's not trusted in the pass blocking game. He had a total of 8 pass blocks. Like they put him in a pass blocking scenario on 8 snaps all of last season. That's nothing.
Man.
So like if you think he's gonna get the passing work because he's athletic, it's only when it's very designed that he is getting the ball, not like he's a check down because he can't pass block. So Zach Moss has had better pass blocking grades. I think just overall he's going to be on the field. And even though Chase Brown, even though he didn't have a better yards per carry than Zach Moss last season, I do think that even if you're looking at it in that standpoint because he's athletic, Zach Moss is so close to like what Joe Mixon has been. Inefficient, pick up the yards you need to on the ground, don't lose a bunch of yards when we need you to just pick up a few. And then also is going to get some work in the passing game and the goal line work. Chase Brown can't get the pass work because he can't pass block. Chase Brown's not a big enough back to go and get the goal line work. So I don't know. I wanted to say all of that, but I was working while y'all were fucking chatting each other up about who fucked up with the pick. So I couldn't get to it, but that was bottled up for like the last week at least.
Well, thank you, Dan. As usual, we're on the same page on a lot more than we're not. You said that much more eloquently than I would have. But yeah, that's a beautiful argument for Zach Moss. I don't know what his value is beyond this season, maybe 2 years, but I think he's a very valuable plug and play running back for at least the next season or possibly two. This is a quick segue. The team that drafted Zach Moss was Kyle. That would be my biggest concern as far as a win now, and I think he's very balanced as far as win now, plus having future capital, young players mixed in. The Keep Trade Cut did not like his team at all. I think it had him rated like 10th out of 12 or something like that. But I disagree wholeheartedly. I think he's got a really solid squad.
He's got some.
I'm here with you. This is a nice team. This is the thing though. Like I talked about this earlier. That having almost too good of balance for what feels like balance right now, it can be thrown off in a couple of years pretty harshly. Like Debo's doesn't have a ton left on his contract. Who knows if they prioritize him or Ayuk? Amon, the top 3 picks, I think, are set. I think Herbert's one of the biggest values in Dynasty right now. It's not always going to be this wide receiver core, and we've seen him put up numbers with a very injured wide receiver core in the past. Those running backs, those top 4 running backs, to get them in 8 through 12, that's insane. I don't know if anyone can only be listening at this point in the podcast, but Najee Harris, David Montgomery, Zach Moss, and Raheem Mostert. All of those guys, I think, are at least RB2s. Got 4 RB2s. Choose your matchup. You're going to do fine. Yeah. So starting in the 8th round, that's really solid.
And then the mixture, Debo is on the older side, but having Amon-Ra as his wide receiver 1, and then having Rome Odunze, JSN, Jaden Reed as those next wide receivers. I like the balance with youth and experience there. The quarterbacks give him a solid base. I don't like Njoku. So I don't really like his tight end position. That would be the one qualm, I would say. But, other than that, he's a scary team for a championship in the first couple of years, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, what do you mean he's bad at tight end? He has Noah Fant to go.
And he dropped all the way to the 18th round. How did we let that happen?
I
passed on him 18 times.
I was thinking in the 18th, I remember thinking, I'm taking Noah Fant. I'm taking him. And then he actually got drafted, and I was just like sitting there like, what the fuck? That doesn't happen.
Dude, I was wondering where Isaiah Likely was going to go. What do you guys think about Isaiah Likely going 4-4?
I think we need this year. He's not going to. I think about halfway through the season, he's an interesting buy low. Because either Andrews is going to get hurt or Andrews is going to be off the team. So
I think he's a lot more valuable to the Andrews owner naturally.
Yeah.
But
I have him on my other teams, trying to figure out what to do with him.
I think he's a hold. I don't think you'll get what he'll be worth in a year or two, unless you can trade him to the Andrews owner, who's nervous about injury. Otherwise, I think he's a hold and wait till Andrews ages out. But he's shown when given the opportunity, he's a tight end 1. He's a top 12 tight end. If Andrews isn't in
when he's got that opportunity, for sure, man.
Well, and that's the thing. Like the Ravens just don't have the wide receivers to they need to highlight a tight end. They don't pass to their running backs. They don't have a ton of wide receivers there, so they really have to rely on the tight end. Yo, Lee, thank you for sticking it out this long. I know we're about 20 minutes past your deadline here, so
always enjoy it, fellas. We'll see you guys next week.
Yes, sir. See you next week. But yeah, Mark Andrews here. Here's his contract. Not, like a ton of years left. He's got 2 years left. He's not going to get cut this year. Why would they? Next year, I don't really even see him getting cut. 29 years old in 2025. only an $11 million cap savings, and he offers so much to that team. He's not going anywhere. And Isaiah Likely's heading into his third year. He's not a first-round pick, so he doesn't have the fifth-round extension. So they're ending their time in Baltimore, in my opinion, at about the same time.
Yeah.
So that's
I mean, do you think
my
it
only
could be
question.
like the Baltimore? I mean, Baltimore has given up a great tight end before.
Yeah,
Well,
I
so-
mean, likely if he goes somewhere, he to the right spot, he can definitely excel a
'Cause
lot.
Look at Waller. Waller went from there to
There's tons in
Dude, I
tons of
forgot
guys
Waller
who
was there. Wow.
are in that same type of physical build. Like Isaiah Likely is a receiver. He's not inline blocking. Like they'll line him up in line, but he is primarily relied on as a receiver. I think that there's an argument to be said, even though with what I was saying, like their contracts will end at the same time. Isaiah Likely will probably not have proven himself as that stud tight end that deserves a top tier contract. But maybe if that happens, if Mark Andrews doesn't get injured and Likely doesn't pop, they could sign Likely to like $6-8 million per year contract for the next 3 or 4 years, and he could pop off. That's the thing about NFL contracts. You never truly know. But it's too much up in the air for me to take him as early in the draft as he was taken. 14th round, there's still some guys on the board that, well, not too many tight ends that are going to be proven. But truthfully, I would take in a short window, Juwan Johnson over him. I do think Jelani Woods is going to be a red zone threat. Hunter Henry, if you're looking at a 1 year window.
Dulcich.
Dulcich, I was looking at that too. I'm not going to say that is the short answer, like a short term fix for your team. I think that he's got a lot of promise. There was last offseason where the head coach, why am I like Sean Payton? Sean Payton's talking about how he always has a joker role on his team, a guy that is just going to create mismatches. He's going to line them up all over the field, let him take snaps from the backfield, and he talked about Greg Dulcich being that guy. Then he goes down to injury, like right as the season's leading up, never gets a chance to really prove it on the field. We'll see if he returns from that injury in full form and could actually fulfill that role, or if maybe they've moved on and tried to draft somebody to fulfill that role. But I do like Dulcich as a sleeper late round dynasty pick that has a ton of upside if it hits.
Yeah.
I've been drafting Dulcich in a couple of leagues just because the upside. I mean, he had some elite production when he was healthy, and I just think everybody is really down on the Broncos offense in general.
Yeah, I agree.
I think just for where he's getting drafted at, there's so much upside. Obviously, where you're drafting him at. If it doesn't hit, it doesn't hit, and you're not mad. It's just like, okay, whatever. Find someone off the waivers who can replace him as a backup tight end. But I think there's a lot of upside for where he is getting drafted at, to where it's worth the pick.
For sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
Risky with him and Jatavian Sanders, though.
I think Jatavian has a lot more upside.
Oh,
they got Juwan Johnson too. Okay.
Juwan, okay, but I mean, it's a tight end premium league.
Yeah.
Having one of those three guys starting can hurt you week after week, because Juwan's not. Even with the demand, there's nobody in the passing offense. It's going to be like Chris Olave first in targets, probably Kamara second in targets, and then Rashid Shaheed second in yards, but third in targets, and then Juwan. Like you're the fourth target on your team. It's not going to work out.
Too.
Say that again?
Taysom Hill's on there too.
Right, dude. Always got to throw Taysom Hill just to ruins everyone's fantasy day week to week.
Taysom Hill is
where did he go?
Confusing player ever to impact fantasy football. When he'll have a week where he makes everybody else terrible, and then you'll start him the next week, and he'll put up like 0.2 points, and you're just like, okay, well, what did I expect? It's Taysom Hill. He's the jack.
Right. It's almost like the Saints see how much, like when you start your players, like, Joe Burrow 99% started or whatever. They see that Taysom Hill cracks that 50% mark and they're like, fucking sit him. We're highlighting Olave today. I do think Arthur Smith actually did that because he actively hates fantasy football and talks about it all the time.
Yeah.
Why else would you say Bijan starting and then sit him after one snap? Just 'cause you hate America and fantasy.
John had the runs or something.
You must have. Hold on. Who was the player that actually had the shits though and left in mid game? You guys remember that?
It was wide receiver. I forgot who.
Yeah, who was that?
It's a real thing to factor in.
Oh, Lamar. It was Lamar, and I think it was actually against the Browns.
Yeah,
I think he left it was after the second half at least, and he ran out of that place, had the shits. We had a little comeback. Fantastic. Someone give Lamar some more laxatives, please.
It's a real thing to factor in. It sounds like a joke, but hey, if they got the stomach flu for a whole week, I don't want to start them because they might got to go shit their pants at halftime.
It is wild. Like you hear about guys playing right in the midst of having the flu or COVID. Like if you guys have had that before, your whole body hurts. And now you're like, I'm going to go play football against 300-pound men who just want to murder me. No, I'm not doing that. I think for the most part, this wraps it up unless you guys want to hit like one. We talked about through round 15. You want to hit
one thing I want to say is I'm glad our discussion ended on talking about players having the shits. So that's a good point to end.
Yeah. There we go.
We got to weigh that in. We'll have a segment in the middle of the year. But if we want to bring up one player that you think is the best value, whether it's your team or somebody else's team, round 16 on. I also, when we have everyone here, do want to bring up, me and Evan took the same strategy. I want to see who you guys think have a better quarterback situation, since we both went late round QB.
The best pick was obviously Kadarius Toney in the 27th round, but
you guys tried to convince me to also take my shitty KC wide receiver take in Sky Moore. I was like, I refuse to do this. You guys. Yeah.
Oh, Dan, it's not a debate. I'd much rather have your quarterback room. I mean, but you spent 4 picks in the top 12 rounds for him. I used 2 in the top 12 rounds.
So you 2 in the top 8. So you got a 5th round and an 8th round. I start in the 7th round, and then I get all 4 of mine in 7 through 12. We still like plug in and mix in some guys in between.
So you invested more capital, rightfully so. You got a better quarterback room for sure.
Later capital to start.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's true. So I guess it depends on how you value it. I don't know.
Like I got Flowers instead of Drake May. You got Joe no, that was Mandy.
Yeah.
I guess McConkey would be your next closest pick, but that's the 6th round. Where I got Cousins at the 7-6. Then you got Deshaun Watson 1 pick before me. I was so surprised because I know how much you love youth. I thought you were definitely going to take Will Levis at 8-6. No, I still would have taken Deshaun there. Is the long contract, rushing upside.
That's why I need with May there. It was too risky having him and Will Levis.
Yeah, I do like the Minshew pick late. If I hadn't already kind of settled up my QB room, I would have considered Minshew.
He's not here. I know I sniped him on that pick. I know I did. I traded up just right before just to do
He's, in my opinion, because he went Aiden O'Connell later in it, but
I know he sniped me on it later. I thought we were friends. Like me and you are friends. I let you have Michael Penix. Like what the heck? He takes Aiden O'Connell from me. I was literally about to take.
I'm curious. Spencer Rattler. do you believe in him taking over Derek Carr's role in the next couple of years, or you
Yeah,
just think it's like, a rookie pick, take a shot?
I do. I do. Were you hoping to cuff Carr?
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna sure up that like the same type of thing, Kirk Cousins, older
Yeah.
quarterback, sure it up with the other guy, and I was considering taking Spencer Rattler instead of Jalen McMillan, but I really do think that the Bucks move on from Godwin after this year, and McMillan gets more of a role. That being said, as well, like K. Dotton is not, a stud tight end. He's gonna get his share, but it's going to be Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rashad White, and then Jalen McMillan. And then after that, McMillan and maybe Rashad White could move on from
They
this
added
offense.
they still have the Trey
Hearing.
Palmer. Trey Palmer's still there.
Yeah, Trey Palmer. I always mix Trey Palmer and Trey Tucker. They're
Yeah.
very similar play style.
Trey
Same
Palmer's still there.
draft
They
class.
got that. Who's the other guy that I actually have on my team? I think on one of my leagues. I might have dropped him already. They're both starting the same year.
To be honest, I don't even know. I'm gonna look up the team, but I don't think there's anybody super notable at wide. You're saying wide receiver?
Yeah. I'm drawing a blank.
Am I in the wrong league? Where the hell is Jalen McMillan? Oh, there
I'm
it
looking it up right now. I don't know how I can't think of this.
is. There's Raheem Jarrett.
Yes, that's him, Raheem Jarrett. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's different than Trey Palmer, and I would say more of an outside wide receiver than Jalen McMillan.
I think Jalen McMillan's better than those guys. I do.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
those guys
I
were, yeah. They were
I
top
think
top.
he's going to step up into wide receiver 2 next year.
Yeah, I mean he's a UW guy. I can't hate him. I like Jalen McMillan for sure. But
You say UW?
yeah, McMillan went to you went to UW.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I mean, I know you used to live out here. I was thinking UB,
Yeah,
like Buffalo. You went there as well.
yeah.
Word, yeah. Okay. I feel like this is a good ending point here. We're 2 hours in. We've talked a lot of stuff. We're at least half of us are drunk, and there's 3 people, so how could there be half? All right, guys. This is gonna wrap it. What's up?
I said, well, I'm drunk, so if you are, that
yeah.
makes me agree.
This
Cheers,
is like
boys.
my 4th, 5th, 8th of it. So like we're gonna wrap it up now. Everybody have a great night. We are going to come back next week, talk about something other than our draft. Enter any questions you guys have about your own drafts coming up, though. Hit us up on our socials. Mine's right underneath my name. What is it? Mason, plug yours. Evan, plug yours.
Evan Gooding 9.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I don't use Twitter, man.
Yeah,
Come
you gotta get
on.
on. You gotta do
Gotta
it.
get on it. All right. So hit one of us up. We'll answer your questions. If you guys have any like strategy, values, whatever you want in Dynasty, we got your needs here. So hit us up. We'll see you guys next week.